Good morning. Thank you for joining us for our April webinar, Become a Digital Marketing Superhero, Tips for SEO Success. I'm Jamie Somley, Marketing Director and Brand Strategist here at Northwoods, and I'm your fill-in webinar host today, while our regular host, Jim Brophy, is on a well-deserved vacation. Today, we're excited to talk about all things SEO, but most importantly, why it's critical not to lose focus on providing authoritative, helpful content that meets your audience's needs, despite changing search algorithms and other shiny new SEO advancements. Your trail guide this morning and one of our very own digital marketing superheroes is digital strategist Alex Boston. Alex blends his academic background in creative writing with rigorous data analysis to conceptualize, create, and assess content for Northwoods clients. He's been creating effective, audience-focused digital content for nearly a decade, increasing search visibility and improving the user experience for B2B, B2C, and nonprofit clients alike. So you are in great hands. But before I turn things over to Alex, let's quickly go over a few housekeeping items. If you have questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to submit them at any time. We'll answer as many questions as we can during our Q&A session at the end of Alex's presentation. If you submitted a question when you registered, we'll answer as many of those as we can during the Q&A as well. Please feel free to use the Zoom chat to connect with our team and other attendees, and use the reactions button in the bottom toolbar to share real-time feedback with Alex at any time. And lastly, we'll be sending out a recording of today's webinar in the next few days, so you'll be able to rewatch it or share it with your colleagues. All right, with those housekeeping items out of the way, I will turn things over to Alex.
All right, thank you, Jamie. So as Jamie mentioned, I've been in the content strategy and SEO space for a little over a decade, or a little under a decade rather. And the space has certainly changed a lot in that time. Search engines have morphed constantly, but there's been a lot of functional, big, dramatic changes in the last few years or months. And that's certainly been a trend throughout Google's history and throughout search engines in general. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how things have shifted in the last 6 months to a year, just in terms of Google's priority ever since the advent of AI and how we can interact with that. There's also always a growing, and this is kind of a trend in SEO, a trend towards wondering if SEO is still a deliberate effort you need to make, or if it's something that we can put on the back burner and not focus on as much, or is it dead as a tactic? And we'll talk about why that's really not the case and why it's in fact something that you need to keep focusing on. And then we have a couple tips at the end for how you can interact with this exciting future of AI. And how we can interact with search and create content that serves what Google's priorities are shifting towards. So let's start with the broad theme that SEO is maybe losing a little bit of its potency or importance, which is something that we've seen a lot in content that's been spurred since the advent of AI, that maybe Google is not as relevant as it used to be, and that it's losing its share of search importance. This is something that has been a trend for SEO. I think I read my first article with something like the title SEO is dead back in 2020, that Google was something that was just not relevant anymore. This is pretty dramatically untrue. Google is still very important and SEO is still very important, but you will see a lot of people trying to cash in on the ultimate failure of Google by creating content around it. Unfortunately, the data just doesn't back this up. And there's a lot of claims that people will say that you'll see online when it comes to search volume declining. Unfortunately, for at least people making that claim, it's really not. In fact, Google searches the total number of searches grew by 20% in 2024. So we're actually seeing the opposite happen, where Google searches are in fact growing. There was a little bit of a slump a couple years back, but it's now back on kind of an upward trend. The next thing you hear pretty frequently is that AI search is completely taking over search results and you don't even need to pay attention to Google or search engines anymore. You just need to optimize for AI. That's also patently untrue. Google controls more than 90% of all search traffic. So all search queries, 90% of them come through Google. The closest competitor is below 4% of that share. And that's not actually ChatGPT, it's Bing. So AI is not even close to taking over in terms of search. Google is still the preeminent voice in search by a substantial margin. And it's still worth keeping them in mind no matter what, as far as your search strategy goes. There's also the critique that search engine traffic is becoming less valuable and converting less frequently and maybe, returning lower quality results for users. And that may be true for some spaces. It's not true for others though. And in fact, it's, doing better in the last few months for a lot of people, especially after the core update in December, which was focused on returning higher quality results and more relevant results. And regardless of all of that though, it remains the most engaged and highest converting source of traffic that we have available to us. So it's still important that we go after it. These are people who have, so to speak, taken the effort of getting in their car and going to the store, basically, but the digital version. They've gone out to the web looking for something. They're in the market and shopping. And so they're a very engaged audience that we want to try and convert into a customer. And it's more likely that they'll do that because they made the effort to try and find something. So to kind of guide this presentation and maybe speak to specific questions as we go, I'm curious how you would describe your organization's current investment in SEO, just to get a sense for how people are interacting with this currently. Whether that's none, minimal investment, SEO is part of our digital marketing strategy, but not our primary focus, or SEO is critical to our digital marketing efforts. And I'll give you guys a couple seconds to kind of put in your responses. All right, looks like we have a pretty even spread of people in the audience, which is great. So we can speak to all of these levels here in this presentation because SEO is something that does require a lot of investment in order to really get value out of it. So wherever you're starting in your SEO journey, we can speak to your specific concerns here. So the good thing about SEO, and another reason to pursue it, is that it just so happens that practicing good search engine practices align with creating a better user experience on your site. If we look at the fundamentals of SEO, and these have not changed, no matter how AI has shifted, no matter how Google's priorities shifted, these have remained the same for a long time in SEO. The key fundamentals are providing authoritative information that is relevant to search queries that people are looking for. It's about maintaining your content and your site in a way that makes it clear that you're taking care of your information, you're updating it, you're keeping it relevant, you're serving as an authority in a space. You're providing focused and intuitive content, so clear content that has a singular purpose on your site within your pages, and not trying to create this sort of messy web of content that's difficult to navigate. So it's really creating single pages that are authoritative locations for each question or query that someone might come to your site with. And then finally, maintaining just a technically sound site, something that's got its technical health well online, it doesn't have high load times, and something that people can enjoy interacting with and just is easy to click through and get pages to load. Every one of these things makes navigating your site simpler. So there's a lot of overlap between creating strong SEO on your site and improving your user experience overall. And that's where my interaction sits, is at the interaction of content and drawing people in to find that content through search. So really thinking in terms of the full life cycle of a piece of content and how people are finding it and also how it lives on the page is important for SEO, which overlaps with pretty much any good digital strategy and any real website content strategy. Any good SEO strategy will focus on some questions that are essential to broad digital strategy as well. So who are my ideal users? Who am I trying to reach with my content? Who would I like to draw into my site? What are they searching for? Am I doing keyword research that makes sense to try and find the people that I want to find? And then how do I provide that information to them? What should that content look like? What forms should it take? What's the process of producing and maintaining that content? All of these questions are useful in any digital strategy. So thinking in terms of SEO can be a good frame to get yourself started for broad content strategy across your sites and for improving UX in general. There's a lot of overlap between these different disciplines. Finding your starting point through search engine optimization can be just a really handy starting point in focusing on your users and reaching them and understanding what they're looking for and using that to drive the content that you have on your site. That sort of challenge of empathy and understanding who your audience is a really core thing to search engine optimization and something that can be really valuable to practice site-wide. The other reason that it's really important to focus on SEO, especially now, is that they're more competitive than ever. The search engine results pages are more crowded than they've ever been. They have more features on them, We don't even see this is a search for what is SEO, the search engine page. We don't even see the top one result until all the way down at the bottom there. And so your number one result, which used to be the primo real estate on a search engine result page, is almost down the fold, might even be a scroll for some users on some browser windows. And so it's not the prime real estate that it used to be. Still very valuable, can still return about 27% of all the traffic that end up on the page. That used to be closer to 35% though. So it is definitely shrinking the amount of traffic that goes to the number one result. That doesn't mean that it's still the place where most people will end up. That 27% still makes it a top dog in terms of traffic drivers, but we are seeing more and more traffic going to these other features and using them to navigate to sites and not even approaching the search results themselves, but interacting with these features to find the content they're looking for. In fact, it seems like the priority is for Google to try and answer these questions that people have, or provide the information that people are looking for in search before they even click through to sites more and more. They want to try and provide as direct a path as possible to the information that people are looking for. And so they're trying to cut out even linking to these other sites, which can be frustrating sometimes to interact as a site owner with these tools that are kind of crowding out your content and are kind of providing all of that information. It is important to note, though, that all of these features, including the AI overview tool, the people also ask drop-down accordion there that you see as well, which includes some other good information and that people do actively direct to sites from. All of those are links back to your sites if you rank well for a given piece of content. So it's not that you're entirely gone, it's that you're appearing in multiple different places if you're well optimized. You can see here, this search engine land article appears in the AI overview up at the top right. It appears in the number one result. And if you open up one of those accordion menus, you'll see it in there as well. So it's not just that they're ranking in the one spot, they're ranking in multiple spots now on the page. So having a well-optimized page that can rank for multiple spots and is prepared for each of these different search features can amplify your effect as opposed to restrict it. But it's just a matter of keeping your content in line with what's going to work for optimizing for AI tools and make those things more interested in pulling your content into those features. The good news is the fundamentals of that still haven't changed. The tactics are still pretty much the same. It's just the real estate of SERP pages that have changed. And so we'll talk to kind of what those tips are, but you could take the tips that we're going to give you here and really apply them a couple years ago, and they would have worked just as well. There's a lot of stuff that hasn't really fundamentally changed. There's just a couple tweaks and some other opportunities we have to optimize for that we didn't have. So it does present more opportunity, I'd say, than cost to have these new features on search pages. The big thing for Google right now is user intent. They're very focused on making sure that they can align their searches with what people are going to want most of all and what information people are looking for. The way they're using AI to do this is by pulling in massive amounts of user information, as well as traffic information and information about how people are moving through to sites, how many people click on this page, how many people click on another, and just generally pulling all of that data together into relevant overviews of what they're going to find. And they're using AI tools to draw all that content together. If you've ever used ChatGPT, you may have used it for this yourself, to kind of pull all that research that you can do with ChatGPT in to bring in a bunch of information very quickly. They're doing that on their AI overview tool. And this is basically because before the question was, if someone were to search for some broad query, like let's say hotels in Wisconsin, they might say, where should search engines send users would be the question for Google, is what is the best place for this? And their algorithm was tuned to try and answer that question over time using data. So is it to send users to a directory page that has maybe like a reviews page or something like that, like a TripAdvisor? Is it best to send users to the sites for the hotels themselves and gather those into search results? Which do users want is really the key that Google was looking at in data. Now they have more data available to them than ever before. And before it was kind of shifting towards directory pages, at least for the past few years, that it was more about if it wasn't a specific query, if it was something broad like this, it would go to the broadest possible curation site where there were a lot of different hotels that may have been gathered up that could link out to those and try and help users find things that way. Now Google's striking a third path. It's using AI to pull all that info into their search engine pages so that people don't even have to go to these directory sites. And again, that can be frustrating for sites that depended on maybe even like a tourism board site or like some other sort of directory or review site may have gathered up that information in the past, it can be frustrating to have Google bypassing you for its AI tools. But you can still optimize your content around being visible to those AI tools and trying to make it visible from there. Generally, this is what we're seeing as Google's favorite at the moment, is trying to pull things into the search engine page so that those pages are richer. That does mean that the pages are more competitive, but it does seem to be the shift that Google is favoring, is serving this up right away. Now, one of the key ways that we used to try and get Google's attention in terms of how did we, kind of try and target keywords and produce content that people would notice, has been blog content. This has been the bread and butter of SEO for years. This was about producing roughly medium to long form content that would answer questions that weren't a great fit for static pages. So those are like the landing pages and key navigation pages on your site. They'd be somewhere between 600 and 1,200 words typically. That can definitely vary, but generally that's what it takes to have something valuable and substantial to users. And that was the key. It was about establishing your authority in a given topic, providing information that users found valuable, and responding to where you were seeing search volume. So finding the terms that a lot of people are searching for and writing content that includes those terms and is written around them to try and draw traffic in and rank for those terms. And also to prove to Google and other search engines that you know what you're talking about in this space and that you can help users who are looking to answer that question. This has been a great tactic for years in terms of just focusing on a single topic that we're trying to be ranking for and writing to something that just maybe doesn't fit into your main navigation. They're a more flexible form that can write something a bit more compelling and more readable than something that is just about navigating people through the site. This is still important content, but the role has changed. As mentioned, this used to be a significant source of organic search traffic. This used to be one of the main drivers. About 20 to 40% of organic search traffic in the highest cases would come from blog articles to a site. Be less than that, but those were kind of some of the highest ones that I encountered. It was treated as a place where this was a main driving path to the site. This was a place that people could find your site and then navigate out from there. And then if you had an authoritative, well-maintained site that was publishing blog content, you were very likely to rank when you published something new. Now things have changed a little bit. This has now become, I would say, a secondary source of traffic. And even that, it's not driving, we're seeing a shifting away from ranking blog articles as highly as those static landing pages on your site. Seems to be a preference towards pointing people to your kind of more stable, steady content, like your actual in-navigation menu pages. That doesn't mean that they're not important, though. They establish your authority in a given topic, so you can write to something that's relevant to your product or service, and then just provide text links to those static navigation pages. And that sends a cue to Google that this is part of our body of content. We're sending users back to our main pages in our site, but we're also an authority in topics adjacent to our product and service. We know how to speak to it, and we can answer users' questions. That does mean that blogs are ranking less than they did before. We're seeing that pretty steadily, especially following a Google update in December of this year, or December of last year, sorry. So where things definitely shifted around and focused more on those landing pages in terms of ranking. These, though, help those build the profile of those ranking pages. It helps search engines understand what you offer and what you cover. And it also illustrates that you're an authority in your space. So they may not rank themselves, but they're still valuable at supporting your other content. With that in mind, again, we come back to user intent. Let's say we have something that's relative to this article that we were just looking at here, this indoor water park hotels, where again, if the question is, where should search engines send users? It kind of makes sense that over time, Google has shifted away from blog articles. Since any three of these, either the directory page, the AI overview, or a site for individual hotels, or featuring individual hotels in search results, any of those is probably going to serve a user better than just a blog article that's been provided by a site owner. So it makes sense that their thinking is, hey, we'd rather send users. It makes more sense to send them directly to key information than it does to send them to a blog article that houses this information. Again, that doesn't mean that Google isn't aware of the blog article and they're not taking it into account when they consider your site's overall authority in your industry. But It's just something to consider that the blog isn't going to be the main thing that's driving traffic. So don't be overly concerned if you don't see them rank like crazy. Just look at your core site rankings and focus on those as far as how they're affecting that. And then you'll be able to see kind of where the impact of the blog lies. You may also get one that ranks. It's not all spaces that are seeing blogs be devalued. Every industry is a little bit different and everything has different user patterns and preferences. So there are some that are still seeing blogs perform very well and still driving a lot of traffic. But just in case after December you saw that shift downwards, don't worry too much about it. You're probably still seeing a shift towards your keywords that you're focusing on just on the static elements of your site. Excuse me. And that goes back to, again, the key priority that they're seeing across all the changes that Google is making. Their core focus is just very clearly on getting users the information they want as quickly as possible. So yes, it's relevance, that's certainly important. And the authority of the sources they point people to, certainly important. But ultimately, it's about cutting middlemen out and getting people immediately to the topics they want to read about or to the information they want and need. With that in mind, if you're just wading into SEO or you haven't really made much investment in it to this point, it's important to understand that Google is constantly adjusting their algorithm. It changes on a fairly regular basis. There's always kind of underlying changes. The core algorithm gets updated roughly 4 to 5 times a year. It kind of varies, and the when it happens varies. There were 4 updates in 2024, as an example. And again, kind of pointing to where Google's focus is. This can kind of help us understand that. This is one of the key tools that SEOs use to understand where their focus is shifting to. They don't provide us with much insight as to what each update does, but there's some things that they give us that we can take. And then also we can analyze our own data to see what we're seeing in terms of where things working and what is not. August and November updates were very volatile within a certain niche space, but they didn't affect the whole swath of the web the way that the March and December updates did. The March update was actually the largest core update in Google history. It caused a lot of volatility. And the reason was there had been a bloom after AI came to be of really low quality spammy content. I'm sure if you've used the internet at all, you've experienced this trend after ChatGPT came out and other AI tools of just producing endless thousands of pages of content that were virtually useless to users, that were not very high quality and were just heavily spammed by a lot of sites to try and rank. This update was aimed at trying to cull some of those, and it did so very effectively. It deranked and even de-indexed a couple sites, meaning that they were removed from Google entirely that were overly practicing this, which is another thing that can happen. If you violate these terms and Google makes a shift and punishes you for something that you're doing that's kind of spammy or low quality, you can be utterly removed from Google search results. So it's best to try and kind of understand the rules and play by them as opposed to trying to cheat the system, because it can always shift. So that's another thing to keep in mind. When it comes to the December update, which I mentioned, that one was also highly volatile, but it wasn't quite as sweeping as the March update. This was more focused on aligning with where users wanted to go for content. So it was focused on aligning with user intent. We did see, as a result, a lot of people had kind of adjacent keyword positions that weren't perfectly relevant to what they offered. I know we had a lot of clients who ranked for terms that were only sort of relevant to what they did or the content that they produced. A lot of those rankings went away after this update. There was a high focus on tuning search results for relevance, not just generating traffic. And what we've seen is generally higher quality traffic, better rankings, more relevance, but maybe a shift in volume of traffic and also a shift in the number of total rankings. So this one was really focused on directing people to the right content for them. And so you may have even seen yourself, a lot of people across the industry saw their total rankings and their total search traffic plummet in January. And that would have been as a result of the update, which was done in mid-early December. So that's something to keep in mind just in general, is that this changes a lot and that we kind of got to roll with the punches and move with what Google is changing, because it's a very volatile space and we don't get a ton of insight into where they're moving and what we need to be doing tactically. So just generally keep this in mind as you're investing in SEO, that this shifts a lot. And I think I'm curious about this as well. Just, have you seen anyone who's monitoring their site data currently? Or if you're not, that's fine too. But have you seen any recent shifts in your rankings or overall search traffic, maybe in the last few months? And choosing between, yes, we've seen those losses, yes, in fact, we've grown, or no, we haven't seen any shifts, or I'm not sure. I'll give you a second again. All right, we've got a split between losses and growth, which is very indicative of what we've seen across the board. And then a lot of not sure, which is totally fine. We're going to show you how to monitor that stuff a little bit. Excuse me. So yeah, a lot of what we've seen across the industry is that there's been either people have seen a lot of growth because their relevant rankings have gotten tighter and they're seeing better traffic and they're more tuned into what their users want, or that loss of overall rankings has really hurt them and they're driving a lot less traffic and they just haven't benefited from that relevancy boost. So very indicative of what we're seeing after in the wake of that update. It was pretty transformational. But as we talk about these updates, we see a lot of things spinning up in response, and people are looking for what do we do with AI and how do we interact with it? And that's why there is this new emphasis on a form of SEO called GEO, or Generative Engine Optimization, which is generally just trying to send signals to Google and other search engines relative to these AI tools. Things that make you more prominent in the eyes of these AI tools and make it more likely that you're going to rank. The good news is, again, while the form of these things has changed and while it creates a few new opportunities, the fundamentals of what we do to try and optimize for these haven't really changed that much, at least so far. It's worth remembering that, again, we're not getting a whole lot of insight from search engines, from AI tools as to how we can better interact with this. This is purely based on experimentation. Everybody in this industry is trying to figure out how this works. Anybody who says they have it figured out is lying. There has not been enough time with these tools to really understand firmly what's going on. And Google gives nobody preferential treatment. They're a black box. And so they do not tell people how to interact with these tools. You have to figure it out on your own. They want you to be producing good content first and not producing content that's built for an algorithm. So they're trying to keep things mysterious so that people focus on their users instead. At least that's the philosophy. And so there's generally speaking a lot of experimentation happening right now. So this is an encouragement to wade in and start experimenting yourself. One thing to be on the lookout for is that ChatGPT is, more than it was when it started, actively linking to sites in the responses it provides to prompts. So a lot of people use it as a research tool. You can actually ask it to include links in its research. This is, can you explain GEO as a prompt, or can you provide me some resources on GEO? Notice that it didn't actually find that term in many places and didn't actually find a lot of relevant stuff to specifically generative engine optimization. It's kind of a new term. It's not something that's got a whole lot of buzz behind it yet. So it actually broadened and said, hey, can you tell me what you're interested in as in its results? But these backlinks drive traffic. So this is a link to SEO Moz, for example, here in the top result, or just Google Ads content. These serve as backlinks, as referral traffic to your site. And so it is something that's worth noting. And this is findable in GA4. If you go to your referral traffic, so it's not being linked as organic search traffic, it is specifically considered referral traffic, you may start seeing BT show up as a session source for referral traffic. And you can see here in this particular example, while it's a small number of traffic, it is growing pretty substantially, at least for this particular case. And that's something we're seeing across the board. So this is something that you can start tracking and keeping an eye on. It is referral traffic. Again, it's not considered organic search, but it is an active backlink. So the question is, with all these AI tools, how do we prepare? What do we do for this, exciting, quote unquote, not as positive maybe as this meme suggests? I think there's a lot of stuff that AI still has been untested in, but there's still a lot of opportunity here to try and capitalize on what AI tools do and to try and make content that still serves our audience, and maybe, if things go the right way, serve audiences with better content and not just the spammy kind of mass-produced blog content that's populated a lot of SEO efforts, and hopefully drive towards something that's a more quality web experience for a lot of people. So when it comes to what we can do and maybe some tips and tricks that you can keep in mind as you're trying to optimize SEO in the age of AI, the first is, as always, and I would say this at any point in my interaction with it over the past decade, it's always best to just start with quality content. You can invest in making good stuff, put the time in to make things that are actually good for your users. Don't neglect the technical side of your site. Don't like leave the technical side and all of that maintenance stuff to just sit on the side. It's very important to do that stuff. If it's a competition between you and another site that is well optimized, Google will go with the optimized, technically sound site every time. You can start tracking that AI-driven traffic. We'll talk about a couple ways of doing that. I'll break each one of these down in more specifics so that you can see some specific tactics. There's new SERP features that provides an opportunity as much as it does a challenge. There's a way to diversify your content so that you're being found in more places than you used to be found in the past. Again, you can align with Google's focus on user intent and provide your own focus on that in content and keywords to try and, as much as possible, complement what Google's trying to do with their search results and drive towards what users are actually looking for. Another thing we're seeing is a rise in voice search. So conversational and question queries can be a big deal. Backlinks are often a focus in SEO and something that people want to have more of, but the best thing you can do to invest in backlinks is to just build your overall brand visibility and authority and try and gather those links organically. Again, we'll talk about some specific tactics when it comes to backlink. The number of people and your domains that link back to your site is a big ranking factor. So just it's definitely it's something that people desire for good reason, but it does take time to develop. And so we'll talk about how to kind of navigate that process. And then the big thing for any SEO is to just experiment with new content, try new things, see what works, and set up your site to analyze the results, and then go from there. Just keep working through the experimentation process and trying new things with your content, because again, we don't get a ton of insight, so we've got to be experimental. So when we say quality content, how exactly does Google assess what content is high quality? Well, there's 4 terms that they use frequently, and this is coming directly from Google: experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. Experience, the overall experience on your site. So it's, what does someone see? Is the content readable? Is it easy to navigate? Does it load in a reasonable time? Things like that. Expertise is signs that people providing content and information that is useful to people and that is actually aligned with what they're looking for. Authoritativeness is generally, are other people linking back to you? Do other people within your space, other sites, link back to you? Do they reference you? Are you proving that you are an authority in the space that other people want to appeal to? And then finally, trustworthiness. Are you maintaining a good site? Are you trying not to, are you doing a bunch of spammy practices? Are you buying up backlinks like crazy? Are you doing things that are against the terms of service of Google? Some of which are enforced actively, some of which aren't as much. But generally speaking, that trustworthiness is also a key factor. This has been Google's driving focus for how it defines quality content for some time. This has not changed. This is still kind of the core way of assessing quality content, is these 4 parameters here. And so we have tactics of building each one. When it comes to providing, the key is providing substantive, relevant information to a query and for users, things that they're looking for, and providing something of value. The print here is a little small, but it's not necessarily the content here that matters so much as this is a fairly lengthy article with lots of very clear headers and subheaders, and it's got a lot of information in it that's good for answering the question in terms of the title, which is just, what is a natatorium, which is a fancy way of saying indoor pool. So just generally content like this can be aligned with your purpose and can be very substantive and can just provide a lot of valuable information to people without being spammy. That's the goal. Again, that helps us serve into expertise too. If we focus on the right topics that are adjacent to our product or service, that helps drive traffic and visibility to our site, because we're demonstrating again and again that we know our stuff and we're providing good content again and again. So that regularity of content is helpful too. They look to 2 different kinds of links. The first is, are you linked to from other people? And also, does your content include links to other high authority sites? So, excuse me, if you're like a health blog, for example, are you linking to accomplished and proven sources of authority on medical information? Or are you linking to kind of spammy, not so great sites that have low quality backlink profiles and just don't show a whole lot of quality content in their library? An important thing to include is you linking out to other places too. But also what links into you is also a key consideration. They take that as a signal that people want to reference your content. So generally speaking, those two links are both important. They also look at the traffic you already have from organic search, which is why sometimes it's good to go after those broad keywords that generate a lot of traffic, even if they're not immediately aligned with sales and driving conversions, just to try and beef up your organic traffic and go after some additional keywords there. So having a varied strategy in terms of what keywords you target can be really helpful. The other thing, obviously, right now, non-duplicate content is a big deal. AI has spiked everybody's concern in plagiarism and the ability to just quickly reproduce content from something that someone else may have put a lot of work into. So just while you can use AI to generate your content, that's totally fine. It has no impact on SEO, so long as it's good. The key is that the content comes out and gets published in a valuable, useful format. Google has said numerous times they do not care if you use ChatGPT to generate it. It's just got to be something that people want to interact with. So always going to be a human element to make sure that that happens. When it comes to site technical stuff, just generally seeing that you're maintaining a well-maintained site, as I mentioned, keeping your load times low, making your stuff mobile responsive. That's pretty much table stakes, mobile responsiveness for the internet at this point. But something to keep in mind as you consider, maybe if you're doing a site refresh, make sure that you're keeping mobile in mind. And then just general signs that you're actively maintaining and updating your content are a great signal to Google that this is content that they want to feature in search results. And that just means regularly adding new content, going back and updating old stuff, any combination of stuff there to just show that you're maintaining the site. So what can we do to maximize our chances of ranking within this quality content framework? We can understand, pardon me, sorry, I'm getting over a cold. We can understand what information users are searching for through keyword research. We can do that through, in particular, SEMrush is a great tool, or Ahrefs. There's a lot of ways to do this, a lot of tools. SEO Moz is another one. To look up your domain and see what you're currently ranking for and understand where you could rank better. Google Analytics as a base tool does not include keyword research, so it won't tell you specific queries. You can use Google Search Console for that. And then you can also integrate Google Search Console in with Google Analytics so you can pull that data into your Google Analytics interface. But Search Console is a very usable tool as well. You can use it in a separate place, and it just provides insight into how people are interacting with what terms and what terms you're being found for, but it is a separate tool, at least at the start. Again, you can integrate them together, but it's not by default a part of Google Analytics. Biggest thing we can do is once we know what users are searching for, we can write content that serves those needs and make it, valuable and intuitive to access and read through. That just, generally speaking, is the core of what we're doing when we create web content, is trying to serve the needs of an audience and answer the questions they have. Again, maintaining your technical health is very important. I would say keep your content focused. So maybe only aim for 2 to 3 keywords in each piece of content. You can always spin up a separate, even if content is close together or very similar in terms of the queries it's focusing on, it's beneficial to focus on 1 or 2, maybe 3 keywords in content that you're really focusing on and going after. That way you can use them throughout your content without, obviously spamming keywords, and then write your whole content to be authoritative and demonstrate a lot of useful information on that specific topic that you're covering. Keyword density used to be a big thing, maybe a decade ago, maybe less than a decade ago, but somewhere around there. It used to be about just how much did you jam your keyword into this particular piece of content to try and rank. That used to be something that you wanted to do. That is no longer a thing. Using your keywords a certain amount is not going to really do much for you. The main focus is to make sure that it's in key places. So making sure your keyword in your title is in your title, your section headers where possible, and in your site's meta description, which if you don't know what meta description is, I'll point one out in the search engine page in a little bit. And that in general is optimizing your metadata is what serves up the data that shows up in search engine pages. So this is things like your meta description, your page's title, your structured data, like your Google Business Profile account, to make sure that you're serving up the right data about your business and optimizing that to make it more likely for people to click through and engage with you. So again, breaking that down, keyword usage is not as big a deal throughout content as it used to be. This was a while ago that it was a big deal, but it was a big deal for a while. Now it's more about making them in the right places. You can also use these headers are key real estate. So any headers throughout content, not only do they help make your content more scannable, which is a big deal for web content. You want people to be able to quickly surf over your content and see where the relevant information is for them. But they're also great places to put keywords. Google will use these to try and create an outline of your article and to try and understand what it's about. And this is whether it's a blog article or a static page. It will help break down the page and understand what your content is about. It's a big primary signal that search engine use to scan the site and make sure that they understand what it's about and what they should rank you for. So this is a big signal you can use. The tendency is to use these for taglines and brand messaging points. That's not really the best way to use this space. It's a big keyword heavy spot to put kind of some ranking stuff and things that you're really going after in terms of a target. I mentioned meta descriptions earlier as well as something that we want to optimize for keywords. The reason that we do that is because this is your meta description. This little bit of data here, it's 155 characters or less, that summarizes the page in search results. This being relevant and demonstrating the relevance of the page to the query is a big way to drive greater click-through rate. So if the title of the page and the meta description are aligned with what the person is looking for, then they're much more likely to click through and end up on your site. So this is why this is another important piece of real estate. Keyword usage is important here, but the more important thing, arguably, is to make sure that you're demonstrating why someone should click through in the meta description, that you're providing a little summary as to what are you going to find on this page and proving to them that they should navigate to you because it's going to answer their question. That's again comes back to empathy, trying to understand what your users are actually looking for with this content and aligning your meta description with that. You can usually set these, depending on what content management system you use, you can usually set these very easily. They're usually included with any content. If you're using the sort of industry standard WordPress plugin for SEO is called Yoast SEO. That's the one I would recommend using. It's pretty much, it's always supported. It's the main one to use. So that's if you're using, but a lot of other plugins for a lot of other CMSs and a lot of structures allow you to just easily place a new meta description. Doesn't mean that Google is definitely going to use it. They love to just kind of pick their own thing sometimes, but it's a submission that you're making to them that this is what I believe this is about. And so that is not only a signal that you're maintaining the site, that you're being intentional with your content, but also an opportunity to drive higher click-through rates in search. Again, the technical side is very important here. And so there's a lot of this list is meant to be overwhelming. So don't worry, you don't have to read all of these. Just to say that there's a lot of technical things, oh God, pardon me, that can hamper site search performance. Anything from, dead links on your site that you need to update and fix. Maybe you've been running a lot of redirects from new pages to, or from old pages to new pages, and now you have a chain of redirects that goes 4 or 5 pages deep, and you're just loading constant redirects on top of one another, slowing down the page load. Maybe there's just opportunities to optimize more, like you have images that don't have alt text in them, which is important, which is just a little bit of text that summarizes the image, both for screen readers and for search engines. So it's also an accessibility concern. In some cases, it's not necessary for every image, but maybe there's an opportunity to be seen in image search more frequently if you optimize those for keywords, which has definitely happened. I've seen this happen with clients in the past, where you go in and keyword optimize alt texts and all of a sudden images start popping up in Google search, which dramatically increases click-through rate. And image search is also becoming more of a factor, so it's worth optimizing your images for search as well. But generally anything here that we use tools like Siteimprove or Screaming Frog for, there's a couple others as well that you can look at. But these tools can help surface these technical issues that you can identify and fix. They do tend to be a little overwhelming for people who aren't familiar with SEO. So it does help to have somebody either on your team or a partner who knows how to read these things and interpret them and prioritize them, because it can seem like you need to fix all of these things and not all of them need to be addressed right away. There's a prioritization that happens. Some are more important than others. And that's where some expertise is helpful in terms of interacting with these reports. As mentioned, GA4 offers the ability to start tracking AI traffic. This is something that I would definitely keep in mind going forward. You can look at this referral traffic in GA4 currently. This is not something you have to plug in or set up separately. It's just something that exists in GA4. Looking at your referral source traffic, you may start seeing ChatGPT show up, and it's showing up more and more. The other thing is there are other search engine tools like SEMrush that provide a lot of good visibility into these SERP features. So things like that AI overview or the people also ask. Those are all curated by the AI function of Google's algorithm. And these are something that you can actually track in SEMrush, where it will actually break down by feature which ones you're currently ranking for and where you're appearing in these sort of overview SERP features. And as you can see, they're becoming more and more prominent as we go. There was definitely an update. The August, September Google update prioritized image search a lot, and we started seeing a lot more image pack results showing up for a lot of people. So image search is definitely something they're looking at as well, which is again why it's worth focusing on your images as content that needs to be optimized just like any other written content. But generally speaking, this is a good way of just getting some visibility through SEMrush into what these features are and what you're ranking for. You can use that as well to guide your efforts to diversify your content. There's a lot of different forms of content that are highlighted in SERP features. So there's featured snippets, which pull out like certain pockets of your site, content within your site, and highlight them. Top stories is more for news related queries, but you might see a breakdown of kind of relevant media sources for a given topic if you have a question related to a hot news item. Knowledge cards and panels are just breakout topics that provide like that Wikipedia panel you see sometimes referenced, where it's just here's a brief summary of what this thing is. Those are things you can also rank for. Image and local packs. Image packs are a new sort of tool for images where they're serving up a lot of different images on the search engine results pages. These are things, again, you can rank for depending on how well optimized your images are for certain keywords. In general, too, you can also appear just for broad image thumbnails on the other side of the column there. Those are especially useful for products. And so if you have an e-commerce site and you're trying to sell products, it's very important to have your product images optimized for relevant keywords because they can show up next to your product listing, which means that, again, if you picture a search engine results page, you're not just showing for the text there, you have an image of your product that will actually be pulled into the search results and sit next to your listing in Google. That can drive, anyway, a substantial increase in the click-through rate because people can see your image in the results page and immediately assess whether it's what they're looking for a little bit more easily. So images are definitely a focus as well. Local packs are more of a local search feature. So it's that map that shows up when you search for something near me and kind of puts pins on a map relative to your search query. That's what a local pack is. It's body of local results based on your location that Google can pull in and understand based on your user patterns. We looked at the accordion that people also ask. That's a great one that does drive a lot of traffic currently. Videos get pulled in as well. Occasionally tweets and social media content will get pulled in too. So just generally speaking, it's a worthwhile idea to just have diverse content that you're throwing out to as many different sources as possible and just seeing how it helps your ranking or doesn't. So this is where experimentation comes in, but there are ways to measure this in SEMrush and to see the impact you're having. Just the tool that I personally advocate for. I'm pretty sure other tools are integrating this feature as well, but it's a great comprehensive tool for if you're interested in getting started in SEO. Our focus on user intent extends to our content as well. So this is where we can get into focusing on what users do we want to reach in our queries and how does that align with their intent? And how should we align our keyword focus? So if I'm trying to sell, as an example, pool room dehumidification systems. So this is like HVAC systems for indoor pools. The temptation would be to go for the dehumidifier keyword, to go for the broadest reach possible. The problem with that keyword is that while it has a dramatically larger amount of search volume, it's broader. It's not perfectly aligned with what I offer. It's also highly competitive, meaning that it's going to be much harder for me to rank for it. Especially if I'm just making my initial investments in SEO, I'm not probably going to be able to rank for a company that's been investing against a company that's been investing in it for years and has built out a authoritative base of content. That's when it comes to what we call long tail keywords. It's one way of describing it anyway, but really it's just stuff that's further down the specification line as far as where you're reaching your users. So it's just people have figured out that they want specifically an indoor pool dehumidifier, and you offer that. So you focus on the specific keyword that may have lower volume, but you're more likely to rank because it's lower competition, and they're more likely to be relevant to what you specifically offer. So the key here is not to always go for the broad high volume keyword. In fact, in this case, if I were just getting started, I would prefer to align more of my content with the indoor pool dehumidifier keyword. Go for lower volume searches, try and get some initial wins, get some rankings on terms that I'm more likely to rank for, and then help establish that authority from there and send very clear early cues to Google as far as what my site is about and what we offer. That said, those broad keywords still have a place in that content strategy. What they do is they help drive more organic traffic if they're lower competition but broad reach keywords. Maybe they're not perfectly aligned with getting sales and converting leads, but they might help you generate some good organic traffic because they have higher search volume. So they're still very useful. Getting that profile of organic traffic helps build your search authority. So Google looks at a percentage of traffic that sites use, or the amount of traffic that sites bring in from organic search, to determine, man, people seem to be really clicking on this a lot. It seems like they must be a really useful resource to users. We should probably drive more rankings to them as a result, because people want to see the content they're creating. So that can be one tool to try and reach out to those kind of broader reach keywords, but also focus on the long tail. So it's kind of using both at the same time. But when I'm just getting started, those long tail keywords are absolutely awesome to focus on. They can usually be some quick wins, get some traffic in, and relevant traffic that can help you get some quick conversions as well, and make sure that if you have especially skeptical leadership that may not believe in SEO, it can be beneficial to start driving immediately towards how do we get leads and sales in. And then you focus on that sort of broader profile. But if you can do both at the same time, go for both at the same time. The other thing we've seen a lot recently has been these conversational queries. So things that are phrased in the terms of a question, because up to 20.5% of internet users worldwide now use voice search to browse search engines. And that's obviously a very large proportion of search traffic. So when they do that, they tend to phrase their queries in terms of questions. They don't go to Siri and say indoor pool dehumidifier. They ask a question about those things. And so that tends to be where we're seeing these greater conversational queries that are driving more and more traffic. And this is only in line to increase. Currently, it's about 142 million Americans that use voice assistants. By 2027, that's expected to go up to 162.7 million. So that's a pretty substantial portion of traffic in this country, and a lot more growth in this space to be expected. So I think this is going to drive a lot of traffic going forward. That's definitely what we're seeing in terms of trends. So what you can do in content is try and include questions and things that align to try and be seen for those specific queries. One example would be, big buzzy topic right now is GLP-1 medications. Those are things like Ozempic and medications like that that are seeing a lot of search volume around them. So here I have some questions, and then in parentheses is roughly how many searches they receive per month. So that's how many times that people are searching for those keywords in a given month on average in the US. So this is just adding the potential to rank and find more search volume to add these questions into your content. So that would be true whether or not voice search were a thing. There's already this kind of volume around these keywords, but a decent portion of those searches are coming from voice search. So it's a good way of, again, optimizing for a new channel that we're seeing to grow. It's just kind of add those questions that people might search using voice search tools. The final tip is backlinks, or not the final tip, the second to final tip is that backlinks are always a big thing people are emphasizing when it comes to search, and they are super important. They can do a lot to point people to your topic and to your content and demonstrate to Google that you are an authority in the space that people want to reference. And in the past, the main way we did this was guest posting. You would do is you would create a blog article that you would write specifically to be hosted on someone else's site, and then they would publish that article on their site and link back to you and your site. So here's an example, for example, from the Hrefs blog, which is a big tool, Hrefs, and an SEO expert writing some expert content, and then there's a backlink back to their site and their relevant blog from there, which helps establish their authority in this space. This is not as big a deal. As you can see, this article is dated 2018. A lot of these spaces have dried up. There are far fewer useful and certainly far fewer free opportunities to guest post than there once were. A lot of them are paid now, which may be worth the investment if you find an authoritative site I'd like to have your content on. But overall, it's not the force that it used to be in terms of backlinking. So what do we do instead? Well, the tendency is, because backlinking is a very constant and long-term investment, it takes a lot of time for little reward. It's a little bit like the marshmallow experiment, which, if you're familiar, was they put a marshmallow in front of some kids and offered them further marshmallows if they just didn't touch it for a while to test whether kids could delay their gratification. The tendency with backlinks is to just try and snap up as many as possible and just try and get an early win with backlinks. That's really not how it works. Backlinks take time to build, and they're closely related to brand authority and brand visibility. It's not really something you can force. And even with all the investment you make, it's very unlikely, or at least very difficult, to see results in terms of if you're doing stuff like cold calls and just trying to set up cross posts and media things and get your name out in the news, or driving your social shares and content. These things can work, but they're not in your control. So there may be no return. You're asking for other parties to interact with your stuff and to share it out for you. There are very few ways to kind of drive this as much as there used to be. So the tendency is to maybe buy links. Maybe I can have my backlink put out into other sites and have them link back to me. This is generally a pretty bad idea. It's very risky. It is against Google terms of service to do this. It's just not always enforced. But every so often they do come around and enforce it. And then sites that have evidence of having bought backlinks from spammy sites start getting deranked and de-indexed. So it's just not worth the risk. It's tempting to do, but it's not worth the risk. And one thing that it's a good idea to do is to kind of manage your backlink profile and actually cull backlinks that are low quality by going into Google Search Console and disavowing those links and saying that you don't want links from that low quality domain. So it's not just about number, it's about brand, and it's about quality backlinks as well. But you can use social content to create backlinks of your own and drive to content that way. And then there are huge networks of content creators out there on the web. And so if there's anything in your industry where people are creating content and maybe interested in a partnership and working with you to kind of help spread the word of your product, that's a great way to potentially pursue a backlink and kind of references from there. The other thing, especially for manufacturers and people who are producing a lot of products or services or some sort of like industry-focused resource, there are a lot of directory sites out there that kind of provide an index of all the people who provide that product or service. And those are going to be opportunities for decently authoritative. But the main thing I would say is just invest in your brand and do the long-term work of trying to lift up your brand visibility so that people want to link back to you. If you pursue any of these other things and your brand is stronger, it will only make that conversation easier. You'll have more value to offer people, and you can say, hey, you want to link to my content because I'm an authoritative voice in this space. So building on your content, making it higher quality, building your reputation takes a long time, and it's a lot of work, but it's worth doing to try and drive people back to your content from there. Unfortunately, there's no real silver bullet for backlinks. It's just something that we have to try and get the word out there as best we can. When it comes to SEO, it's a constantly changing game. Google doesn't provide us with much direction, so you have to be a scientist. You have to get experimental, try new things, create new kinds of content. Try going after keywords you've never gone after before, refreshing the content that you've done in the past and seeing how that changes things. The other thing is making sure you have data set up in the right place to measure your success and to make sure that you're tracking and getting visibility. Oh my goodness. Sorry. Setting up analytics to measure success. And then also check out some things like Moz and other industry resources that allow you to get some information on what the industry is seeing in terms of search changes. So algorithms change all the time, like I mentioned, and you can, a lot of SEOs are very open about sharing their information, and you can learn what's working and what's not from them. You can also use your data as well as a first starting point. So again, that's why we want to set up the analytics to measure that success. And then remember also, it's very tempting to get very despairing when things start to turn downwards. You will experience a red shift in terms of traffic at some point where things trend downwards and then recover. It's a very volatile thing, search results. So it's kind of inevitable that you will at some point see traffic downturn. This is just something that occurs as part of the industry, and these rankings change constantly. 1 month of bad data doesn't mean you have an emergency, unless you have literally fallen off a cliff, like your rankings have gone completely out the window and you've lost like 80% of your search traffic. Like otherwise, you can just like try and weather it out, learn what you can, be patient, and take in data before you freak out and start making a bunch of changes with no real data behind your changes. I wanted to share this graph in particular. This is a great graph for SEO. It doesn't look like much because it looks like it took forever to get there. But this is how it actually works. As you build and you build and you build, it can take a while to get really any impact and to understand what's going on and what you need to be working on. And all of a sudden, you can see right around here, you start catching something that's working, you start building on it, and you start seeing your rankings and your number of rankings in high traffic producing positions steadily build. And then when an update gets made, suddenly you're in a position of high quality and authority to benefit from it, and you start to spike. And this is back on a building trajectory after, again, that January update, hit this particular case study and dove it back downwards. We're now back on the up and up and trending back upwards. So just generally, this line is what's important. The trend line all the way through is what matters more than individual month fluctuations. It's a long-term game and it takes time. So yeah, those are the tips that I would say to focus on right now. I think those are the things that are most important at the moment, but to stay attentive and to pay attention to all of this because it's constantly changing. These things are all very new, especially AI. And again, be wary of anyone who's trying to tell you that they have the answer. There is no silver bullet here. It's just something that represents the knowledge that we have so far. In terms of what's working and what's not. So just keep on analyzing, use your data and learn from there. And generally, you'll be in a good position to benefit from the changes in SEO going forward. And I think with that, we can move into the Q&A.
All right. Thank you so much, Alex. So much excellent content, really helpful insights. We received a ton of great questions with registrations and a couple during our webinar here. And I think you actually touched on most of them during your presentation. Since we're a bit over time, we're actually out of time for Q&A. But if you submitted a question that Alex didn't touch on during his presentation, we will reach out to you directly with an answer and resources. And absolutely don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any further questions or you'd like a deeper dive into any questions you submitted that we maybe didn't get into in depth. So before we wrap things up, I do want to mention that we will be randomly drawing a winner for a mini SEO audit after today's webinar. So those of you who joined us live today and have a valid business email address, you've automatically been entered, and we will reach out to our winner within 1 week and we'll get the ball rolling on your mini audit. So good luck to all. Also, please join us on May 8th for our next webinar, Micro Moves, Major Impact, How Small Website Tweaks Can Drive Big Results for Manufacturers. All of our webinars are free and begin at 10 a.m. Central. You can learn more and register at learn@northwoods.com. And if you're looking for information on a specific topic or you just want to stay up to date on the latest trends, check out our blog, recorded webinars, our YouTube channel, and our Around the Campfire vodcast, featuring casual conversations with our experts on all things digital. And lastly, if you'd like to learn more about Northwoods and the many services we offer, please visit us at nwsdigital.com. After the webinar window closes, you will have the opportunity to take a short survey. We'd greatly appreciate it if you could share your feedback on how we did this morning. We do use your input to help us improve and provide content that's most beneficial to you. So with that, thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at another upcoming webinar. Have a great day and a great weekend.